Hey there, welcome. Thanks for being here. If you like the content, then love for you to subscribe and like. And we are going to be talking, of course, about relational intimacy, divine love, divine union, and sacred union. You see, I've got all these phases and stages in there, and twin flames. Twin flames as a model for all of us on our evolutionary journey of love with a capital L. So, welcome, and I hope this finds you well. So, we're going to talk a little bit today about seeing relationships in the higher love perspective. And what I mean by that is, who are we beyond our karma and our woundedness? Who would we be if we were truly living out what we have in our hearts in our romantic relationships, in our partnerships? How would we really want to be treated, and how would we really want to treat the people that we love? We know this, I believe, and I think we've known it when we have more of our innocence, when we're younger, when we might feel a little bit more open and warm and fuzzy. And that innocence is actually a very powerful place. And along this whole trajectory, part of what we're doing is we're learning to return to that innocence again. And that doesn't mean naivete, that doesn't mean gullibility, that doesn't mean forgetfulness. It means coming to the essence of innocence. The essence of innocence is a part of one of the higher qualities of our divine humanness. And, when Jesus makes the comment, I don't remember it exactly, that we will all become like children. And what that's meaning is we become healed and whole. And we are able then to return to a state of being that we have long forgotten. And in probably each lifetime that we have, we get like a blip of what that really feels like. And I think when we look around today, even children and younger adults, they've lost their innocence really early on, much more so, I think, in general, than my generation, and I think each generation successively has their karma gets kicked into full gear. Now, there are a lot of teachers that talk about that karma is already healed and that we don't really have karma anymore. And I want to just mention that really quick, because on the higher dimensional realities that are landing, okay, meaning us multi-dimensionally that we have access to, we have outgrown the karma. It has been released, healed, and integrated into more levels of wholeness. Those of us who have been doing this journey for, decades, or maybe even their entire lifetime, don't really carry the kind of karma that those who have not done their inner work yet. So I don't really like to put absolutes on anything, as you know, and I like phases and stages, because when we try to incorporate something that is beyond our developmental stage, we feel like we're doing something wrong. We feel like we're not getting it. We feel like, we've missed the boat or missed the train. But in fact, it's never that simple or black and white. So this is the subtleties that I think are important to work within and to talk about so that everybody knows they're in the right place at the right time. And this goes for our, moving into higher love relationships. There are developmental phases and stages that prepare us and enable us to be in the world, be in relationship in specific ways. And we all have our own aspects of us that lag behind somebody else's aspects, so to speak, or it just hasn't been our area of focus. So we haven't jumped in that pool to do that work yet. Whereas, your expertise may be something completely different because that's what your life journey has really taught you. So this is what my life journey has really taught me. And my job then is to support you if this is what you feel called to as your journey to move successively and successfully through these phases and stages. So when we're talking about beginning to see ourselves as healed and whole and knowing what that means for relationship and what that means for intimacy. And I've talked about this before, that when we're in, like our first loves, so to speak, there is almost, and I'm not going to say for everybody, but often there is that deep trust that, oh, this is it, right? We're still in that enlivened state and phase of trusting our heart and trusting our soul, and particularly if that experience is a really positive and good one, and I realize not all are. So here's something interesting about the twin flames. So twin flames, when we'll just say in this lifetime in particular, because this is the lifetime where all of this is culminating, right? These mystery teachings that have been kept a little bit more secret and under wraps for thousands of years are now out and front and center. So in this lifetime, the way that this plays out most commonly, not across the board, not, absolute, but most commonly, is that when these twins come together, when these souls come together for a period of time, there is that knowing that there's a very deep connection, that there's something there. And then what normally happens is that there is an activation point. And that activation point sets the counterparts apart into polarity. Now, I can say for myself, had no idea, of course, when I'm 18, 19 years old, or 17, 18, whatever that was, that this is what happened, right? Where there was a moment in time in the height of where the love and the home, being home, in that first love, where there was an activation point where I got activated into my trauma. Now, this was not trauma from this lifetime, but I got activated, which then, and all of my stuff started coming to the surface, and then the polarities grew, and, we could say the drama phase of these relationships set into motion. Now, it was only a temporary chaser-runner situation with me of the chaser, of course. Usually it's the feminine, not always. But what ended up happening was the higher love qualities and the ways in which I was showing up within this relationship. And I believe that my counterpart had much less baggage than I did, and he was able to show up with a lot more maturity, let's say, and a lot more groundedness and a lot more clarity, which makes sense as well, because the masculine usually holds that, whereas the feminine holds more of that chaos. So I went on a deep dive, right, and went much, I don't know, I want to say off the rails, but let's just say kind of like the myth of Inanna, right, or the dark feminine. There's a fall that happens with the feminine because the feminine tends to be the leader in this journey because of the qualities of the feminine, of the soul. The feminine starts going through rites of initiation of her own darkness. So I spent years, probably that decade, that next decade, before I started coming topside again, right? I went into the underworld and I had to face a lot of my own darkness. I had to face other people's darkness, so really it just was a lot of dysfunction, right? A lot of dysfunction, a lot of drama that kept triggering trauma back and forth, right? Trauma equals karma. The karma of whoever I was in relationship with. And because I'm a forerunner, I had the wherewithal very early on to be able to really dissect and reflect and analyze and see my progression, both downwards and then upwards, so that I could really learn from this journey. But I didn't know that this was the journey that I was on at the time. I didn't know that for another decades. So what tends to happen then is we lose, right? Both the masculine and feminine, when we empty out, when we get those initial heartbreaks, that innocence begins to fall back into the recesses of our knowing. And we begin then to operate from our karma. And that karma takes us on journeys of different situations, people, places, things, depending on what our main areas of learning are, to face our own issues. And ideally, that's what we need to do, right? We need to face, we need to look at, everything that's created out here, I'm a part of creating it. It isn't happening to me, even though it can feel like that. So there's an original, just like there's an original sin, as is talked about. Sin is really just missing the mark, right? It's just missing the mark. It's not evil. It's not horrific. It's simply missing our right alignment and really not knowing how to get into a right alignment. And usually what keeps us from that is our karma, which is why the healing journey is necessary, right? And needed, so we can really know ourselves better. So who were we when we were still innocent, when we believed in love, when we believed in happily ever after? And I'm sure when I say that, people are going to be like, right? right? Rightfully so, because we don't have any models for that. We don't have experience in that. We have been taught and programmed into that's a fairy tale, hence fairy tales. However, what if that's what we're now able to access? Happily ever after does not mean perfection, does not mean that there's never any, shadow part of that light. But what it begins to mean is that we can start to believe that there is a divine plan. And the twin journey, because of the way that they each counterpart has to learn. I want to look at some of this really quick. Some of the writings and downloads that I have. And I've talked a little bit about this before. So our twin counterparts, this journey that is setting the stage and setting the tone and creating the foundation by anchoring these light codes, these higher consciousness codes, onto this plane. The counterparts are teaching one another, mostly unbeknownst to them, about first and foremost self-love. There is the necessity of loving ourselves. That is the initial foundation. And so we're drawn inward to ourself, away from the counterpart. Instead, we're guided to focus on loving ourselves, falling in love with ourselves, rather than seeking love outside. The twin journey also teaches about the alchemy of polarities, the alchemy of our own inner masculine and feminine. And so we get to come into relationship with our shadowed expressions of masculine and feminine. So what I've talked about many times is I have had an imbalance of my masculine. I have a lot of fire and I have a lot of air, which is fabulous because that is part of my makeup. But what isn't fabulous is when it isn't in balance and harmonized with my water and my earth. So I get to work with, why am I afraid of softening and surrendering into my feminine, right? I get to work with why is it hard for me to allow myself to be vulnerable, right? Because these are masculine traits. Masculine traits will tend to be less apt. Also, just because it's not that they don't have access and they do need it, but their ratio of that is going to be different, and the relationship is going to be different to softness and vulnerability and generosity and love, the way that love flows, and nurturing and nourishing. So while I have those, there's also been historically the guarding. And I have much more time being activated outwardly. I have much more time being straight and to the point, being clear, being a little bit harsh, being a little bit abrupt. So these are the balances that I've had to work with within myself to allow my masculine to step back and allow my feminine to step forward. Now, if somebody has a stronger feminine and not a lot of masculine, then that's going to be what they get to work with, and gender doesn't matter. And we're going to know what our right ratio is once we actually know what it feels like to be in harmony. And self-love gets us there, first and foremost. So then the twins also, right, they teach about love, what it is to love unconditionally, not through obligation, not through tit for tat, not for transactional love, but loving unconditionally. And they have an easier time learning about this through self-love, through the alchemy, through the ways in which divine source works and our higher selves work with each counterpart. We get to learn about surrender and all of this, and trust. And we move from personal love, right, that conditional love, into divine love. And as we do this, we are maturing. We are maturing emotionally, spiritually, and relationally. And we come into deeper levels of intimacy. So it is through healing those karmic divisions and fears and woundings and the protectiveness that we feel like and we believe that we need. But in essence, as we move along the path of relational intimacy and higher love, we let all of that fall because we have come inside, first and foremost. So how is that, like, how is some of that valuable, and how does some of that open us up to be able to come into relationship with more ease and grace? So we'll just look at rejection, right, as one of the main things. We tend to have storylines that if somebody can't meet us where we need, we talked about the needs before, or if somebody leaves us or breaks up with us, then we take that as rejection of us, of abandonment, of there's something wrong with us. And this isn't right or wrong, good or bad. What it is doing is it's showing us that this is a belief that I have. I believe already intrinsically that there's something wrong with me. And when somebody leaves me, they simply are shining the light and triggering that belief in me. But that isn't right. So it's not necessarily a rejection of. It's simply somebody, our person, you know, or somebody that we're with, realizing, deciding, feeling, sensing that they aren't in alignment. It isn't right for them. They're not in love anymore. They've grown, they've changed, life circumstances, or perhaps, you know, somebody has sort of shown a side of them that is not really, doesn't feel good. And they realize that that's not what they want. Now, when we're in conditional or transactional or in karmic situations, we take that very personally. When we're in higher states of seeing and knowing, we recognize, oh yeah, maybe I was toxic, right? Maybe I was too chaotic. It was too much drama. Or maybe it just wasn't a right fit anymore, right? Maybe they grew, I grew, and it just didn't feel right. So each person begins to honor their own truth. And when we've healed whatever those karmic wounds are, we don't own it anymore. It's not a truth for us anymore. And so we can open our hearts more easily. We can trust. And I have a whole other video on trust. It's a very long one. Because it's not a simple black and white thing. But we can open up and trust that we want first and foremost to be able to love. We don't want to live in fear. We want to live in connection. We want to live in openness and vulnerability and intimacy. Even if it pushes our edges, right? That's where the growth is in a healthy way, if the edges are expanded and stretched in a healthy way. Does that mean that we won't grow apart? Does that mean that I or my person at some point may feel like, gosh, that was so good then, and now we don't know how we can get back on the same page? Does it mean that we don't have loss and hurt and longing and a little bit of heartbreak? We do, but we aren't afraid of it. The biggest fear comes from we take it personally and we feel our own stories inside of us of not being good enough, of abandonment, of rejection. And it's those stories that are linked to things that we have forgotten where the original pain is. But when we've expanded through our healing, we can be with our people and recognize that we're here for a reason. There's a divine plan. It's not for naught. But it may not be for what we think it is. So when we get to the twin flame level, or when we get into the healed and whole space, and or at least close to that, what we start to recognize is that we come in from a deeply aligned center. And we have already established our blueprint and our signature frequency. So we have come into more of our wholeness. And when we get into these higher loves and sacred union into divine union, like I talked about before, the signatures click. They naturally, there's home, it's right. And to the best of my knowledge at this point in time, the karma has been healed for the most part. Or at least the denser, more traumatic karma has been integrated, purified, unified, so that in these higher states, when it syncs up, not through, a lot of like, whoo, excitement and revving and, the extreme. It's a peace, it's grounding, it's love, it's safety. Because we're safe in ourselves, we're safe in the other. And the desires of each are unconditional and focused only on the highest good for the whole. And that also means the highest good of each at any given time. So I talked about some of that before, right? It's like what we can give at a certain time and what we can't give. And when we're operating in the higher love levels, we don't take it personal. We might have a need, but that need doesn't compel us to not be able to self-source. It compels us to be able to self-source, self-soothe, and know and trust that our person wants to be there when it's also in their best interest. So it's these higher ways of being, these higher qualities. And in this, when we're trusting in the divine plan, when we're knowing and trusting that our unions are not just our doing, they're held in the divine. And when we can offer our relationships into a higher intelligence, this steps us into divine union, the relational aspect of divine union. Divine union is that unification, purification, clarification, integration with all of life. But for right now, that divine union is when we are in our coupledom and offering it up to the divine, trusting the divine, trusting divine love to guide and support, checking in, right, with divine love, with life, what is in the best interest, right? What is right and true at any given time. And this goes for even the divine counterparts or the twins, you know, they come in to connection, not through self-will, but through faith and trust that no matter what happens, it's held by something much bigger. And not all twins, I want to just say, for those of you who are on that twin path, I'm sure that you've heard, even though it's not like necessarily the way that we want to think about it, right, from our human perspective, but not all twins unite in union on this plane, right? They don't all come into relationship on this plane. But they might have friendships, right? They might have creative collaborations, or they may just simply have a lovely, peaceful knowing of one another. And yet they're always in sync and always working together because they are entangled, because they are one, right? So as we continue to move into these higher states of love, we allow those qualities to teach us. Self-love first and foremost. Alchemical marriage within. Surrendering to both your masculine and feminine in their highest qualities and expressions. Cultivating those qualities and expressions. Surrendering to the divine is huge. That's part and parcel. Trusting us. Trusting the divine first and foremost. Allowing your own journey to move you from personal love into unconditional love. Because that is the evolution of humanity at this time as we move into our divine humanity. So it's a beautiful journey. It's not a quick journey. It's a nuanced journey, but it's rich. And it's very experiential, that things that cannot necessarily have words put to them easily. And when we have a vision of where we're going, right? When we have a vision of what is dropping in as the new becoming, we can gauge where we're at and what are the steps we need to take as we move forward. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon. Much love.